Just relaxing here in my scrubs, and we're going to have scalloped potatoes and ham tonight for dinner, so I thought I'd whip something up, maybe a nice bread. So let's do this together. I'm going to start with about 2½ teaspoons of yeast. I'll put about 1/3 cup of warm water, about 110 degrees, into a bowl. So it'll be the yeast and the water and a pinch of sugar to give the yeast something to feed on. But I'm going to take this bowl, I'm going to rinse it out in hot water. I don't want to put it into a cold bowl. Okay, I've just put almost a tablespoon of yeast in 1/3 cup of 110 degrees, warm to the touch water. And now I'm going to sprinkle just a little bit of sugar in there to give it some food so the yeast will love it and eat it up. And now I'm going to just stir it. Try and get it really dissolved. And once we do that, we'll let it sit and the yeast will start to grow. So now it's time to peek in and see what our yeast mixture is doing. It's been sitting for about 10 minutes, about 1/3 cup of warm water, and almost a tablespoon of the yeast. So let's see if it's getting ready. Oh yes, it looks perfect. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a slurry out of 1 cup of flour, add it right to this yeast, stirring it on just a little bit at a time with the other end of a wooden spoon. The key is adding a little bit at a time. Boy, that yeast sure foamed up really good. You can see it looks good enough to... All right, before I add the rest of this 1 cup of flour, I'm going to put 1 cup of water in with this yeast. All right, so I'm going to add about a cup of water and continue to stir this until it really becomes dissolved. And this is just 1 cup of water now to the 1/3 cup of water and yeast mixture. So now totally I have about 1 1/3 cups of water in here. So when I start adding all of the flour, including the cup of flour that's already in here, I should probably have a total of nearly 3 cups of flour. We'll have to play that by ear. I don't really measure things out exactly. I want to kind of mix the flour in and then see what the consistency is of it as I begin to knead it. So now I have that 1 cup of flour into the slurry mixture. Actually, I've only added about half of it. I'm going to add the rest of this 1 cup of flour, the first cup of flour out of the 3. That's going to go in. And be sure this is completely dissolved before I add any more flour. So I've gotten rid of the handle of that wooden spoon, and I have a little spatula here that will help me dissolve or mix up the little lumps in here. But lumps are not going to hurt anything. So, but I just heard something. Okay, so that's a little lumpy, but it's time to add the 2nd cup of flour. So here it is. I'm going to do a little bit at a time. And I will continue to do this until we get close to 3 cups. And when we get to that point, you'll see how this changes. So again, the ratio when you make bread is usually 1 to 3. 1 cup of liquid to 3 cups of flour. Of course, you're going to put in, I'm going to put in a tablespoon of vegetable oil. I'm going to do that in just a second to make the bread a little bit more creamier, smoother. After this dough has gotten very pliable, that's when I'll add the salt. I don't want to add a little teaspoon of salt too soon because that could kill your yeast. So we want that yeast to thrive and continue eating the sugar that I initially put that little pinch of in here. So over time, I'm adding the rest of the flour, and I'll show you where we get. Now this is what it's supposed to look like after the 2nd cup of flour has gone in. So just to let you know, Obviously too moist to do anything with, too sticky to even handle. But at the second cup of flour, this is what it should look like. So now I'm going to start adding the third cup of flour. All the time. We may not need this whole third cup. It really depends upon the consistency, how it's behaving. And one thing I like to do, some people will flour a surface and then turn this out and knead it on the surface, and I do that a lot too. But occasionally, I'll knead it in the bowl. You see how it's incorporating now? It's starting to stiffen up a little bit. As soon as the dough is not sticking to the bottom of the bowl here, we know we're close. So adding the flour just a little bit at a time to incorporate it in. Of course, the more flour you add, the harder it's going to be to incorporate it. But there's a period where I'm just going to start using my hands. I want to get past the period where it sticks to my fingers. And it's starting to look pretty good, isn't it? A little bit more here. It looks like I won't have to use all 3 cups. Let me use my hands here and see what it feels like. Yep, it's a little sticky, a little too sticky, so I'll probably have to have a little bit more flour. But it's very close to being where we want it. See, it's not sticking to my hands. Still need to incorporate a little bit more flour, but we are almost there. Really making bread, people think you have to have exact measurements. Well, maybe you do for most people. But for me, I think it's a matter of feel. Now, the bread we're going to be making today is a quick and easy bread, and we're going to put a salt and pepper top on it. We're going to put a pan of water in the oven on the lower shelf as we preheat the oven, which will hopefully give us a nice crust on the top of the bread. And then when we pull the bread out, we're going to spread the top with butter. Doesn't that look good? And that's a little teeny sticky. I'm going to add just a touch more, and I think we'll be done. And of course, the technique when you're making bread is to knead it with the base of your hand. It's still trying to stick to my fingertips, as you can see, which tells me a little bit more flour. Easy baby steps all the way. Still sticking to the bottom of the bowl. We know we don't want that if we want a finished product. So this has come up to where I can touch it and it doesn't stick to my fingers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it out on any kind of surface, and I'm going to wash this bowl out, and then I'm going to put it right back in the bowl. Spray the bowl with a little non-stick spray like a Pam. Put it in the bowl and cover it and let it sit for an hour. So I've turned it out into the bowl, and I've sprayed the inside of the bowl with a little Pam, and then I've turned the dough upside down to take a little bit of that Pam on top of it. Now I'm going to cover this bowl with saran wrap and lay a towel on top of that and let it rest for about an hour. See you in an hour, which may be a couple of seconds your time. So I've just covered with the bowl with saran wrap, and here's a before picture. This is what it looks like before it rests for an hour. So that's before it rises. That's what you see. And I'm going to move it over here in a warm place under the light of the stove. And just so we don't have any kind of a draft, cover it with a towel, set it aside, and we'll look at it again in an hour. Okay, it's been about exactly an hour, and I want to show you what has happened over here in the bowl. We're going to pull it over here and do the big reveal. You saw how small the dough was. Look at this. So the dough has risen. Now, if I was making a pizza or something like that, I would knock down and punch down this dough and start stretching out and eating it to increase the gluten. But I don't want to do that. I like the bubbles in it, so I'm not going to just be brutal with the dough. I'm going to be kind of gentle. I am going to knock it down, but not viciously. Just kind of like this. Pull it away from the side of the bowl, like that. And then I'm going to put it in this pan, which I have sprayed with butter-flavored Pam. And it'll rise again for a second time. Now, before it rises, I'm going to coat it with egg white to seal it, and then black pepper. I'm not going to put the salt crust on it just yet, because that may kill the rise. So I'm going to let it rise the second time with the black pepper and egg white. And then I'll put a salt on it just before it goes in the oven. Alright, so I've made a little egg wash. This is the egg white from one egg, and then maybe a tablespoon of water. Whipped it up so it frosted a little bit. And with the froth on top, I'll come down here to the bread. If you see, it hasn't risen the second time yet, so I want to do this rather quickly and spread the egg whites on top of the bread. It'll hold the pepper in place. That I'm going to put on next. I have a nice pepper and salt crust bread, but I don't want to put the salt on until it's ready to go into the oven. So that's a pretty good wash right there on top, and I'm going to put some coarse ground pepper on it. That smells good. And then we'll cover it with saran wrap and another towel and let it sit and take a peek in about a half an hour. Okay, it's been about 35 minutes since we left the loaf of dough in the bread pan. So let's go down and take a look at it. You can already see the second rising has occurred, and it looks pretty doggone good. So what we're going to do, now I sprayed the inside of this plastic wrap with a non-cooking spray so it wouldn't stick to the dough coming off. We're going to gently take this off so it won't fall. Take it off and put it in the oven. In the oven, I've already put a little pan of water so that as the oven preheated, it would also put a lot of moisture into the oven. So now we're in the oven. The pot of water's in there to give it a whole lot of moisture and hopefully a nice golden brown crust. The oven is at 400 degrees. We're going to cook it for 30 minutes. And then, of course, we're going to tap it to be sure it's done. Oh, we'll add the salt, too. Let's do that now. All right, it's been about 30 minutes. Cut the oven off. Now remember, I put the salt in a little too late. So it looks like when I peeked in the oven, the bread is falling a little bit. But that's not going to happen if you put the salt in before you put it in the oven. That's a beautiful golden color. Let's see if we can take it out. Oh, that sounds perfect. So I'm going to put a little butter on the top. Do I like butter? And here we have salt and pepper, salt top bread. Well, let's see how the bread turned out. Nice crust on it. Look at that nice spongy. Ah, that's what's for dinner. And by the way, I want to take this opportunity to point out, if you haven't already gotten a copy of my novel, The Lost Road of the Ancients, now's would be a good opportunity to go online at amazon.com/books. And when you go to the search bar, you got to put in the entire title, The Lost Road of the Ancients. That's product placement.